10th day of April 2023. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. You can call in at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. We're having a reasonable day as we play out this extinction event known as Fukushima. The plume model to your left, this is reactor 3 blowing up, by the way. The plume model in reactor 3 looks like that. Reactor 1 also blew up. And 3 and 4 and reactor 2 detonated. Let's get rid of the music. All I should do is just play music in my headphones while doing the show. Maybe I'll do that for a change. Let's get after it, I guess. So they're moving people back into Okuma and Fukushima, which are connected to the nuclear meltdown. Like they're physically connected to the communities on both sides of the nuclear Fukushima Daiichi 1, and it's like the two towns meet in the center of Fukushima nuclear meltdown. It's the border of the two towns, though. They're both abandoned. So in order to prop up the nuclear industry, what they in their bizarre wisdom decided is to bear with me, is to decide to open a school. So does opening a school 2 kilometers from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns where 8 fuel pools detonated in Okuma, which is the north side of the nuclear meltdowns, prove that the pro-nuclear industry is cruel and actually evil? I think it's easy to make that case. I'm going to walk you through some of these headlines for just a couple of minutes. Smoke was pouring out of reactor 1 before the tsunami hit. That was the detonation of reactor 1. Somewhere, right there. And that's reactor 1 to your right. The fuel pool was at the top of the building. As you can see, there's no top or fuel pool in the building. This year they're claiming they're going to start taking fuel out of the pool, same as they had done for reactor 3 and reactor 4 that actually didn't exist. So that on its own, there's many government models of the plume and studies showing it showing up. That was sustained for months and months in these high numbers. The bottom model is 26 days of radioactive, or 26 days after the tsunami. So smoke was pouring out of 1 before the tsunami hit, which meant it was melting down. Not going to melt down, but was melting down before the tsunami got there. Top Japanese nuclear expert proponent, government's announcement is wrong. I believe all the fuel rods are completely melted down. Let's have a look at the buildings. The fuel pools are at the top of the buildings, which are decades of reactor cores. Let me repeat that because it deserves at least that much. This was decades of reactor cores. We've never had an event like this in history. This is an event. This is a catastrophic event for all species. This is not a game. Let me repeat that. This is not a game. The government projections assume 1 becquerel per hour was leaking from Fukushima. 1 becquerel, 1 atom. How many atoms are in a plume covering the entire planet in 26 days? Wasn't it 30 million pounds of atoms? This is reactor 3 blown up, so they assume nothing got out. So the industry doesn't have a right to exist. The industry, by all measures should be jailed forever, everybody in the industry, because they're just evil at nature. To move children back into a nuclear wasteland is just too much. They've crossed the line. That's contempt. And it's disrespectful and dishonest. And I'm not going to tolerate it. Claiming 1 becquerel per hour was leaking from the plant. If a nuclear academic said that to me, I'd kick the shit out of him right on the spot. Even if I was 95 years old, I'd get up and kick the shit out of him right on the spot. The headline, Japan's government kept the meltdown risk a secret. So did all the universities and the medias, by the way. A spokesperson was replaced after letting it slip out. Public anger is exploding as Japan discovers more about the government downplaying the spread of radioactive radiation. If you don't understand the significance of that bottom model at 26 days, that's radioactive fallout covering the whole planet. If that doesn't concern you, there's something wrong with you. You're not connected to reality at all. You can't escape it. Your friends, your families, your loved ones, nothing can escape it. No species, nothing. And so you got to deal with it. And you can't deal with it by pretending it didn't happen. It's disconnect, and that's not acceptable. Nuclear disaster is far from over. The government evaded admitting meltdowns, delayed disclosure of the radiation data. Wikipedia didn't even publicly admit it for the first 2 years. We humiliated them, and they finally even put it up on Wikipedia and started admitting that there's meltdowns. How did we ever get to be that evil? How did we end up with an industry capable of being that evil? Or is that what the industry is? It's evil. Because that would make more sense. Which, you got to appreciate that it starts at the universities. Fukushima nuclear plume covered most of North America. Covered the entire continents. Then it covered the whole planet in about 16 days. High radiation forces withdrawals of the victims trying to restore the power. You couldn't restore power to buildings that are destroyed. So to your left is what it looked like immediately after the detonations. You can't restore power. There was 480 kilometers of the coastline was stripped by the tsunami up to 10, 20 kilometers inland. Japan's government is trying to stop citizens from taking their own radiation measurements. They were actually banning the sale of foreign Geiger counters in the country. So how much power does the nuclear industry that the government can do stuff like that for them? I'll tell you how much power it is. It's too much. It's a Orwellian government at that state, right? And so the evidence is pretty overwhelming how insane this whole story is, but this is bioaccumulative. It never goes away. It's constantly adding to the load the ecosystem has to bear. TEPCO paid for creation of a blacklist of actors and musicians who are against the nuclear industry. This is a corporation that was paid for the creation of a blacklist. And so who did they pay to create the blacklist is another question I got that I would love to have the answer to. The plumes, there's many models. This model is just 20 days up in the top left-hand corner. To suggest that the model didn't cover the whole planet by the 12th of May is absurd. It's a continuous plume even in that model, by the way. So there's no way it doesn't cover the whole planet, right? But that's just 20-day model, by the way. Yellow rain around Tokyo caused by pollen. officials say. Now, they had the yellow rain after Chernobyl, too. Rain, and it was snowing, by the way. Rain may have contained radioactivity. Well, no matter where it rained, it was radioactivity, right? There is no safe level of radionuclide exposures, anthropogenic man-made. Not the distraction, but the actual stuff from nuclear reactors. Whether from food, contaminated water, contaminated air, period. And that the International Atomic Energy Agency announced or admitted on June the 2nd, 2011, that their standards are based on natural stuff, not man-made radiation. So why are they ever in the conversation? They have no right to be in the conversation, International Atomic Energy Agency. The standards they're using are based on natural, not man-made. And why is a corporation like this, UN, dictating worldwide what we can say and do and what our standards are? How did we ever become that stupid? We allowed that to happen. Well, we've abrogated our responsibilities by not holding the system accountable. And now the system is so cumbersome it has to consume all the resources and all the population in order to exist. Prime Minister contemplated evacuating 30 million people from Tokyo. He didn't because he feared panic. They got 100, there's one nuclear plant in America, they all got sirens around them. One of them got over 160 sirens within 10 miles. Typically it's 70 to 100 sirens. But they're not going to use the sirens because they don't want to cause chaos. Sirens were put there, of course, after 3 Mile Island hoodwinking, where 2 million people were severely harmed and would ended up dying of one of 1,800 diseases. Tokyo area was hit with an unnoticed wave of radioactive materials from Fukushima. The plume covers the whole planet, so you can imagine how bad Japan actually is. High concentrations of Fukushima radioactive substances found in land animals. Frogs, for instance, is 6,700 atomic decays. Now that's just one single emitter they're talking about. So they're not looking for betas or alphas or neutrons or X-rays. And if you don't put that into the equation, then you're stupid. Excuse the expression. You're not being responsible. Rice planted 10 miles from the Daiichi nuclear meltdowns. Residents can't stay in the town overnight. They shouldn't be in the town in that case. And it's intended for sale. It's 2013. Do you really think they stopped growing food there? Vegetables from inside Fukushima no-go zone now okay to ship to stores. 2013. The no-go zone is the nuclear wasteland where no one's allowed to live. Why are you growing food in a no-go zone? A no-go zone means you don't go there, and you definitely don't go there and farm. Unless you're Japanese after a nuclear accident, apparently. You better stop this madness. It's so easy. They can't handle any resistance. Look at the censorship they do to me. If that's not desperation, what actually is? Imagine 1,000 people like me out there beating the shit out of them constantly. They'll fall to their knees in 3 weeks. Got a poll for everybody tonight. Does opening schools 2 kilometers from ongoing multiple nuclear reactor meltdowns and 8 fuel pools that detonated and burnt in Okuma, which is 2 kilometers away from the nuclear ongoing meltdowns, prove that the pro-nuclear worldwide is cruel and evil for not speaking out, for not trying to stop it, for not trying to deal with it? They won't even go there. Imagine doing a show for a decade and you get 20 people on your show. Covering nothing but important elements. Oh, we got James calling in. Hi, James. Hang on there. A little slow here tonight. Hi, James. It's James Lucy for people that are familiar in the comments section.
I just wanted to call in and just say publicly a great happy birthday to Kevin Blanche.
Oh, right. Excellent. Wow.
He turned 21 today.
That's awesome.
So,
yeah, I forgot that.
He looks great. He did a video early. He's a beast. Kevin is a beast.
Yeah, he's busy, isn't he? Yeah.
But you triggered something just earlier. Just the madness. Earlier today, this video popped up on my recommended feed or whatever. It was something to the effect of debunking fusion. So I'm like, all right, I'll look at this. And it's from this channel called Thunderfoot.
Oh, yeah. Scumbag Thunderfoot, yeah.
You seen that?
No,
Yeah,
he's a pro-nuclear dirtbag. I usually won't go near his site.
Well, I've never seen this before, so
yeah, go ahead.
I'm watching this, and,
Yeah.
And he's going off about like how this impossible fusion is, and how it's getting into all these like metrics, showing all kinds of visualizations to kind of let the viewer kind of understand how fusion is impractical because you need to be the sun in order to do it. But at the 12-minute and 55-second mark, he actually says this. He says, Chernobyl was the worst conceivable disaster and nothing as bad has ever happened before. And so I'm like, what did I just hear? Because I was kind of in zombie mode, just kind of listening, and then I heard that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I wrote a comment. I'm like, 12 minutes, 55. WTF, Thunderfoot. What about, have you ever heard of Fukushima? And, like, I got attacked by all these people, like, oh, just ignore them, like, I'm a troll. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I had slipped into the mainstream accidentally on YouTube and realized just how bad it is with the consciousness out there. Like,
yeah, nuclear students hang out at his site, right?
Oh, okay.
Like, I've done a video about him, had 115,000 views on it, where I kicked the shit out of him. Years ago, right?
Well, it's just so unsettling. Yeah, years ago. But now, I mean, like, then you're still here. You're still doing this. And, like, well, this is really just, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what kind of crime to call it.
Yeah,
but, obviously, YouTube.
There's Veritasium is another one that does the same thing. He's got multi-millions of subscribers. He's very popular. And he done a documentary with CNN originally, and he compared everything to bananas. And so he had, and I actually made videos where I beat the shit out of him too, on purpose. Now I got another one ready to go in the pipe there, by the way, on that guy, on both of them. And I just didn't care anymore, right?
It's just so sad. You got to waste your time with stupid shit like that. You've been out there, you're documenting those dolphins just dead on the beach. Yep. On those rocks.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even know dolphins could get that small. I mean, realize that they're just emaciated, but...
Yeah, I was watching the videos today on it, actually.
It's incredible. All right, there. I just needed to get that off my chest.
No, I'm glad you called. Good stuff. Yeah. No,
okay. All right.
Because, yeah, thanks. Okay, James. And, yeah, okay, you too now. Bye-bye. Right, and so I had done a video on Thunderfoot quite a few years back. And he's a notorious troll. He's been around a long time. And he's going to tell you it's like eating bananas, flying on airplanes, climbing mountains. And he'll go into great detail Hang on a second here. Maybe I can. I got a picture of him here. He's British, by the way. There was another British guy that was famous, and so I put them alongside of each other. Bear with me. When I put them alongside of each other, that's them there. I said, that's one's the shoe bomber to the right, and Phil is to the left. His name is Philip. And I debunked him on a number of occasions. But he's got a huge amount of nuclear students and nuclear employees that hang out at his site. And their job is to bombard you with propaganda. And so like James Lucid was saying, he put a comment there. And he got harassed by a whole bunch of scumbags, useful idiots for the industry, right? And that's the whole site. He's been debunked on by a number of different sites too. Got sick of him. They actually came out and beat the shit out of him and other stuff too. We've been going back and forth at least 8 years with that creature, Phil, which is Thunderfoot, I believe. He spells it with zeros instead of O's. Quite the scumbag. But anyway, when you look at him and the shoe bomber, you have to wonder if they're brothers, right? They're terrorists, regardless. And that's what, whenever I talk about him, that's what I'll say. Look at one of them, two of them are terrorists. And the coincidence is they look a lot alike. So you got to watch out for terrorists. A lot of them look alike, is all I can tell you. Thyroid abnormalities in 55% of the Fukushima girls tested 11 to 15. So, if you're doing an interview and you had Thunderfoot there, you can beat the shit out of him with this stuff, right? He's not going to have no answers. He can't blame it on bananas and potato chips if you've done an interview. And people like that are only going to do controlled interviews where both sides are controlled. I mean, that's going to wreck his narrative right away. And so generally, I got a whole list of these typed out. And so when I run into propaganda machines, I'll put 10 or 20 of these in each post. And I'll post 30 or 40 of these headlines. And they don't argue with you anymore. I do it on the major media news sites whenever I'm pissed off. Japan's crew face a 100-year battle at Fukushima, but nuclear scientists won't go there. Nuclear academics, nuclear universities not going there. Japan TV broadcast 2012, by the way. Mutations in animals and plants after Fukushima. Very few insects, only 2 birds. That was 2012. Because Japan got a brutal continuous dose, right? So we got 4 more or 5 more of these to get through. Radioactive substances from Fukushima belong to the landowners, not TEPCO. TEPCO shouldn't exist. It should be the nuclear regulatory agencies or the International Atomic Energy Agency, right? No, their job is just to make suggestions, so to speak. They're not physically going to do something. And so you blame TEPCO instead of the people responsible, the nuclear industry itself, the nuclear associations, the regulatory agencies. It's surreal that this could happen and has happened. As November tests show massive contamination far outside the evacuation zone. Massive contamination. 235,000 becquerels per kilogram of grass, which is a level that would put the area into a Chernobyl no-entry zone. So I got to multiply by 60 or 64 to get a square meter, which is 15 million becquerels a square meter. And it should be the no-go zone should be infinitely less than that. And a nuclear plant is typically 55. Extreme cases 155, not 15 million. is considered a no-go zone. Before Fukushima, 100 becquerels a kilogram of cesium is nuclear waste after it's safe to eat. So how is 100 becquerels just barely, that's the upper limit they claim that is safe to eat, but 235,000 becquerels per kilogram is okay. Because it's airborne. This is not, because becquerels are physical atoms, see? And everything's not going to be in the ground or stay in the ground when you're talking about these types of numbers. You're talking about huge airborne radiation to get that kind of actual number. I mean, they flew over at 1,000 feet and we're getting 3 million becquerels square meter from 1,000 feet above it. So it has to pulse energy for 1,000 feet for that detector to pick it up. 1,000 years from now, contaminated was so radioactive fallout. That's why radioactive fallout is so dangerous, because it'll pulse right through your whole house. So this is why they want you to harden up parts of your home with walls 4 feet thick or something, right? It's not going to stop it. It's just going to reduce it on top of that. 1,000 years from now, contaminated water, lethal by the liter, for millions of years, may still be entering the ocean. Well, it never stopped entering the ocean. That's 2013. But yet, they got the world convinced, or a lot of people are convinced, certainly the media is working hard to do it, that everything is in the tanks. This is France's model. And this is based on 16 days. For when you get, say, this far. That's 16 days of radioactive fallout. That's the whole planet. Okay, so we got one more. So this one always cracks me up because of the implications in the context of the nuclear industry is so vicious. They told Hawaii farmers, by feeding cows and goats boron, that was fighting the you can't fight the radiation by giving animals boron. It's like saying, taking to the top of a building and giving you a nickel and saying, now you could fly. So go ahead and jump. Well, in that case, you die right away. In this case, you die a few years later or a couple of decades later, depending on if you were on vacation, for instance, right? So you got a lot of people coming through on vacations. Let's give them the radioactive heavy stuff. Classes return to Japantown hosting Fukushima nuclear plant, hosting it. For the first time since 2011, accident at the Fukushima number 1 nuclear power plant, the town of Okuma, that hosts part of the plant, held a ceremony Monday for the return of classes to the town. So this is in the center of a nuclear wasteland. The red is what they emit is a nuclear wasteland. What they call a no-goes, a difficult to return zone. Me and you would call it a nuclear waste. Everybody else on the planet calls it a nuclear wasteland. If they call it a nuclear wasteland, it means never going back, right? So they call it a difficult to return. So they subconsciously plant the thought that you will return at some point. And so they send in thousands of homeless, and they pick up the topsoil and then declare it decontaminated. But that's not how that works. And I mean, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around why the general population doesn't understand something like that. Because they're really good at hiding everything, right? But they like to brag, and they have to come out and make official statements, part of their road to deception. And so this was part of it, right? So Okuma, which is right alongside the nuclear meltdown itself, and is in the red zone, the little section of it, is going to be open up. We're only talking about a little section, right? Of that. By the way, it's only 10% of that town that's open. And part of that 10% is a school. They're going to bring kids there. They're not going to live there. They're going to bring them there to go to school. Then they're going to take them back to the town, like Koriyama or wherever it is that they're currently at. The kids are not staying there, but they're going to school there. So is the nursery. And that's how does that become acceptable? Like, how can we be proud of sitting in silence while the victims, like, you can never get me into a nuclear wasteland, but the kids don't know any better. They don't have anybody to protect them. They don't have anybody to speak out for them. They don't have anybody to rally for them. They don't have anybody to tell them the difference. They don't have anybody to inform them. The ceremony was held at a community facility for 26 children who attend blah 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 school, an elementary and junior high school, as well as a certified child care facility. The building is still under construction, but will be finished soon. During the first semester, students will take classes at rooms in the town facility in Okuma. They got to bus them in there to go to school in the town's facility. Take them from a school they're going to. That's not, well, it is a nuclear wasteland, but it's not right alongside of multiple nuclear meltdowns, where they also got 14 million one-ton bags of radiation stored in the same town. Only 10% of it is open. How do we ever get to this stage? The student will attend classes at the new school building from the second semester. Learning in our hometown is starting, said 14-year-old student. Doesn't know any better. We'll take pride in opening a path to the future because they've been brainwashed to regurgitate nonsense like that, right? Okuma was completely evacuated. Now, we've been covering this every week, basically. This town and other parts of the prefecture. And so now all of a sudden we're going to move them into a nuclear wasteland. They're going to move into that little, well, Okuma is basically, where am I? Basically right there. right alongside of the nuclear meltdown on top of that. So they're going to move them into the no-go zone, but only 10% of the town is open. They can't, if they're playing ball, they can't chase the ball across the street because that's a nuclear wasteland. It's just, like, to me, it's hard to believe that this is actually happening. Despite the fact that I cover this nightmarish all the time, I still can't rationalize this is actually happening. I still have to pinch myself every day when I wake up and before I do my show. On shitty YouTube. Censors the living shit out of me. That's okay. That's what I'm for, to be censored. Oh, that smarts. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and click the bell. Not that that's going to work the majority of the times. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's, except for the scum industry, of course. Everybody else. Come on, troll, get out of here, you nuke troll. Come on, give us a like. Don't be so cheap. Kidding, I don't care. It's all good. Consider sharing little clips of my videos on different sites. Don't put my name on it. Don't put Fukushima on it. Just put on popular subjects on the little clips. Remember, the Hulk was created by the nuclear industry. Spider-Man was created by the nuclear industry. So don't let your loved ones give your children, your grandchildren, and your cousins memorabilia from these caricatures that are meant to disenfranchise them from reality. It disarms them in increments over a long time And not only that, all of a sudden, nobody can be a hero, only some Marvel comic cartoon. So the heroes doesn't exist. Parents can't be heroes no more. Grandparents can't be heroes no more because they don't have a cape, right? And just to dilute the word relentlessly, they have guitar or GoPro hero, guitar hero. These are meant to disenfranchise your children from the family. Just remember, in the old days, we used to get rid of our problems. There's two ways. But the problem's got to go at some point, right? The problem has to go. And nuclear is a problem. They're actually like an alien species. They hate us and all the species. They hate the bacteria, the fungus, the flora, the fauna. They hate it all. It's okay to have a conversation about this, because if you don't, you're never going to hear it nowhere else. So we do this. We're like a little lighthouse in a storm for those who manage to find us. And all of a sudden, everything starts clicking. And after a little while, now they're not going to be tricked by the industry no more. And hopefully, they'll raise their children to go out and put a poison pill in the nuclear industry and destroy it in increments too. And so Kevin Blanch's birthday, he's 21 years old. That's pretty awesome. And so Okuma, now the community they're coming out of is Kuriyama. To go to a lot of, not all of them, but the majority of them moved to Kuriyama. Their parents did, right? A lot of them were born long after Fukushima meltdown. So they don't even understand it. Propaganda is prolific in Japanese school. Let me see. Hang on there. We'll get there. So I just want to show you a story about Kuriyama so you can understand that even Kuriyama is not safe. It's breathtaking how much documentation I actually have. Because sometimes even I have trouble finding. It's even worse when I don't wear my glasses, right? These are not the right ones. Bear with me. It's worth it, I hope. Oh, luck would have it. Bingo, I got it. Bear with me. Kuriyama City. There we go. Okay. So this story is about Kuriyama City. Elementary school in Japan is using water bottles to shield students from radiation. To shield students from radiation. Think about that statement for a second, because that is a frightening story. An elementary school in Kuriyama City, which is located in Fukushima, 34 miles away from Okuma, which is what we're talking about, west of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, which is the nuclear meltdown. Let's conveniently leave all of that out. So they're 34 miles away from the nuclear meltdown. And they're using water bottles to shield radiation coming from the courtyard and other areas around the school buildings. The bottles are filled with water and placed inside the square boxes, which are stacked around the classrooms. And we thank James Lucid for that, because I seen his comment there. I was like, oh yeah, right, that's Koriyama City. So what they do is they take water bottles, stack it in boxes, and then stack the boxes inside and outside. So that's outside. And inside of the school to shield the students from the radiation outdoors. Rather than move them out of there. So it's not a big stretch to take the same students now and move them back to the nuclear wasteland itself 34 miles away. It's using water bottles to shield radiation coming from the courtyard and other areas around the school building. And of course, the school is completely radioactive inside and outside. The bottles are filled with water and placed inside a square boxes, which are stored and stacked around the classroom. According to the school, it reduced the radiation levels by 1/3. But the radiation they're talking about is stuff you're breathing. This is airborne radiation. Yeah, there's lots in the garden and the playground and everything else. And they're not supposed to be in Koriyama City. Fukushima City is even farther away, over 300,000 people. And every house, every building is entitled to be decontaminated, but you can't decontaminate something in a nuclear wasteland, certainly not a house. So Koriyama City, the absorbed doses red bone marrow. Now for children, when it gets in the bones, it mutates their stem cells. This is United Nations Scientific Committee, and which I disclosed up front. I despise United Nations with every fiber in my body. They're only acknowledging cesium, and you can be sure they're not acknowledging all of it. Per square meter. In Koriyama City is 162,000. So you got to start assuming. Well, first off, for every cesium-137, there's 100 times strontium-90 produced, and there's not just one goes one way and one goes the other way. If you find one, you're going to find all the other ones. So, but the reactors run on plutonium, uranium. Everything is coming out of uranium, right? All of these ultimately came from uranium. All these isotopes. So 341,000 people with 162,000 sustained of just gamma. So you got to talk about alphas and neutrons and betas. What about them? You can't exclude them. It's not like they're not going to be there. And what they do is they pull, all of them pulse energy almost at the speed of light every second. So per square meter is 162 they emit. But that's just gamma. And that's just cesium. There's many, many different types of gamma. And it's going to be there. So all of these are pulsing energy at the speed of light, but none of them will mix with each other, blend with each other, or be able to pass through each other. What they do is they hit each other, the pulse is at 186,000 miles per second, and they break. It's what's known as a braking effect, and then they change direction. Like throwing a tennis ball at the wall. And you got a $1 billion priceless vase there on table right in front of the wall, and you keep throwing. Eventually, you're going to hit that priceless vase, right? But imagine that the massive numbers we're actually talking about. So these hitting each other, changing direction, is also known as X-rays, and this is what's considered whole body X-rays. And so this will sterilize all the insects. And maybe 1,000 feet away, like the plane that was flying over it, measuring it is. But it'll pulse energy certainly 50, 60, 100 feet every second. It'll pulse right through your house. And you were warned about this for decades, and then now they don't warn you no more. So to leave children in that environment, isn't that the definition of contempt? I got a poll for everybody tonight, by the way. An important poll, I might add. Extraordinarily important one. Does opening a school 2 kilometers from ongoing nuclear meltdowns in Okuma, which is the story we're talking about, where they're moving children back, prove pro-nuclear is cruel? It's because it's cruel to do it, and you have to be pretty evil just to sit in silence and allow that to happen. So the people in the nuclear industry are well aware of what's happening. So that's proof of malfeasance, but on a lethal level. And we covered that story the other night. I don't know why it's there again tonight. Oh, that's somebody else published it, I think. The 60th anniversary of the tragedy of the sinking of the U.S. nuclear submarine Thresher. Let me skip through all of this. What's going on here? Oh, that was just one headline. Okay. So when I seen this today, I blew up laughing. It's not because it's funny. It's because it's ridiculous. And again, right, it's dangerous to suggest that they're going to protect you from Fukushima waters, which hasn't stopped coming out of there. They've never been able to contain it. You can't contain the filtration or the water. You can't filter it. Taiwan has a system in place to protect the public from radioactive ocean contamination. The Ocean Atomic Energy Council said as Japan moves closer to dumping wastewater, this is the idea is to make you worry about what might happen, not what is happening, right? And in this case, the whole story is completely fabrication. They're trying to get you to think about tritium and pretend that that's what the battle is over and that everything else was filtered out. And then claiming a partial meltdown. This, not the brainwash. When it comes from big media, then you really got to worry about this framing of a narrative that way. But a multi-agency program is launched to protect the public from tritium pollution. Of course, suggesting that what you're worried about is tritium. Protect the public from tritium. I don't it's so stupid to say something like this. Let me walk back for a second. Because it's hard to wrap your mind around it. But the radioactive fallout covered all the oceans immediately, for starters. They've poured water over constantly and haven't been able to filter it. And the reason you can't filter the water, so they talk about 1,000 becquerels per liter, but California is 15 becquerels per liter. Of course, again, you can't debate something that's ridiculous, right? This is what they want you to do. But, it doesn't hurt to throw... this was a German study for 6 years of emissions into the ocean. The whole ocean was incredibly radioactive. Again, you're excluding the airborne constant radioactive fallout. This is a 40-day model from Americans, NOAA. This is a model of Neptunium-239. I can't remember the decay on Neptunium-239, how long it takes before it decays to Plutonium-239. But it's not that long because you also have models of Plutonium-239. These are based on TEPCO's numbers, modeled at major institutions, right? And so the oceans are covered immediately after an accident. And we've done research expeditions for 6 years to Alaska. And you can find that stuff up at nuclearproctologist.org. And the first pictures you come across are the before and after pictures. They're at nuclearproctologist.org. Japan nuclear water dump plant violates laws. This is China. First off, if you fill up the tanks with the numbers, I'll show you the short of it, because I'm a bit of a sucker for punishment anyway. Here's the short of it coming up. Now remember, they had a series system. They had a lot of different systems, right? Just bear with me, we're almost there. So TEPCO abandoned the Riva, which is the same as the Alps. That's 2014, the system was unused. The Riva system, 2014, was unused. And there's areas of the sites you didn't have control of, which meant lethal doses. The SARRY, S-A-R-R-Y system, was supposed to filter the fabled cesium isotopes out. That didn't work. The problem with it all was that the filters are so radioactive you can't get near them again. So 100 million becquerels per cubic centimeter for the sludge. These are absurd numbers, by the way. The bypass operation didn't work. Failed to deliver on a fence, the ice wall. Why would you put an ice wall when you can put a real wall? And just, we'll get one more for you. Hang on. Because the tanks were built at the one time in 2013. Late 2000 or middle of 2013 to the first part of 2014. They built 1,000 tanks. That's how many tanks do you have today? You can fill all the tanks up 6 times a day with just one reactor. And you're talking about the reactors before they melt down need 4,500 tons a minute of water. So how much do you really think they need after they melt down? Bear with me, we're almost there. Well, it's good practice for me to always dig up this stuff, right? Keeps me sharp, keeps me honest, keeps me busy. Should be right here somewhere. Yep, there you go. We've been listening to this fable of the tanks for a long time, right? By the way, let me see. There we go. So, I mean, they've had politicians allegedly drinking the water from the filters. This was before 2014. And I showed you that the ELP system, the Riva system, hadn't worked even in 2014. TEPCO made Fukushima plant into a machine for generating radioactive water. Runoff from molten atomic cores now in the groundwater in the ocean. Not in the tanks. 2 sieverts an hour of beta radiation emitted from a single liter of leak water. So if you fill up one of these tanks at just the beta, at 2.2 sieverts per liter, well, you can't build another tank there because it's a lethal dose everywhere on site. You're talking about 1.4 million sievert. But you can't just have beta. So it's, by the way, 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. Just walking past you die a couple weeks later. The fable about the ice wall. Why wouldn't you build a real wall, first off? And claiming that 260,000 people worked on creating the ice wall, which meant that each person made around $1,240 if you don't build the ice wall. back to this story here. Now, this story now we covered that last night, but, of course, the original first bit of information he released is meant to confuse the daylight set of people and take the wind out of their sails. Then they start releasing the real stuff. Get a load of this one. They're talking about a small area of Tokyo, which has 36 million people, a couple of districts, right? A total of 34,200 metric tons. Now, they say they disposed of the majority of it. This is incinerator ash. They were calling it mud in the story last night. This is incinerator ash. So, when you burn something, you're only left with a small percentage of what you burnt, right? So you're left, let's say 20% left after you burn the garbage. So the other 80% was atomized in aerosol. And the thing with radiation isotopes that we're talking about is you can't destroy them, so you just liberate them back into the environment. At 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, we'll loft them high up and they'll find a victim. Let me get to it. So they're keeping 26,000 tons of the radioactive contaminated waste within a sewage facility as incinerated sludge ash. So now we're talking about incinerating sewage also. That's what they're talking about there. As the radiation ash in both cities below the level of designated hazard waste, which they say is 8,000 becquerels per kilogram, which is 5 million becquerels per square meter. These are absurd numbers again. So these cities, including Chiba, answered the same. Based on peak amount of radioactive sludge, and we don't know what they're talking about anymore, whether this is incinerator ash or sewage ash, kept by these local bodies, they estimated they had disposed of at least 120,000 tons. 120,000 tons. It's 264 million pounds of radioactive waste that they disposed of. But they don't say how they disposed of it. TEPCO wouldn't have nothing to do with it. Well, how did you dispose of it? And by the way, we're talking numbers that could easily be, because we've covered a lot of this. And the one thing we learned about this industry is they like to lie later, and then you catch them years down the road claiming different from the original information, right? So that meant they burnt around 21 billion pounds to end up with 264 million pounds of radioactive. This is absurd numbers we're talking about. So it's like 120,000 trucks, 1-ton trucks of just incredibly radioactive ash. That this is what they're admitting to. Now, what the hell this is a lot. Now, what did you do with 120,000 1-ton truckloads of 2,200 pound ash, radioactive ash? Which, by the way, ash gets used for a lot of things like soap and that, right? It's a frightening question, see? You're talking about 21 billion pounds got burnt to produce that much of radioactive. And the numbers we covered on sewage and garbage and sediment from the water reclamation facilities and ash from the incinerators, when you start adding it all up, the numbers are, multiply that by at least 5. And now you're starting to get somewhere. But when they're talking about becquerels, which is physical atoms, of course, because they're going to get liberated when you're burning them, we had a lot of stories where they claimed the ash, the radiation stays in the ash, that's why they burn it. These are dirty bombs by the kilogram we're talking about. Pre-Fukushima, all of this would have been considered a dirty bomb per kilogram. It's a stunning revelation, I can tell you that much. And Germany will be closing down their nuclear power plants in a couple of days, right? The last 3. What do I got there? The first U.S. lunar rover is headed to the moon, and students from Pennsylvania University you got it there somewhere. Carnegie Mellon University. They're pro-nuclear scum, right? So, how come NASA never put a rover on the moon? They keep putting, they've been doing it for decades, putting rovers on Mars and other planets and moons and stuff like this, but they didn't put one on the moon. How come? And now their experiment that these students are doing, the rover, which only weighs 2 kilograms, by the way, only weighs 2 kilograms. There it is. The whole experiment is 2.5 days long, and then it's a disposable. Then it doesn't work no more. But why wouldn't you run it, put it on where the sun shines on the moon all the time, and let it run forever? Why wouldn't you do that? There's no wind on the moon, so it's not like the solar panels would get covered up by dust or something, right? So how come the experiment is only meant to be 2 days? And all it's going to do is take images. Why is the moon... how come they didn't go back over the last 50 years? How come Russia didn't go up there? How come China's not up there? How come India's not up there? You got any idea how many shuttle missions they took? It's only 3 days away. The moon is. There's zero, they can send all these spacecrafts in deep space and the asteroids and land on planets in the solar system, but they can't go back to the moon. There's something going on that we don't know, obviously, right? Well, why is the moon so taboo? What's going on here? There's no question. Why is the experiment only going to be 2.5 days? Why put all this money and energy and effort? Why is the astronauts that they're bragging about going to the moon not going to the moon? They're going to circle the moon. Why don't they land on the moon? Why are they going to circle the moon? Why would you do something like that? Canada just picked an astronaut to go to the moon, is what the headline says. And when you read the story, they're not actually going to the moon. They're going to circle the moon. Nothing makes any sense. The nuclear industry actually makes more sense than what they're doing. The nuclear industry doesn't make any sense. Welcome to friggin' stupid world. Westminster keeps nuclear secret to avoid upsetting the Scottish government. So the United Kingdom refuses to release any information because they're afraid terrorists are going to take it no matter how insignificant it is and use it to glean insight and then attack United Kingdom nuclear industry. The Scottish, who's holding a lot of nuclear weapons, nuclear subs here, because that makes them a target, right, instead of the UK, don't understand why even the upper, the politicians can't get any answers. Okay, we don't want to tell the public, at least tell the politicians so they understand, he said. And they're like, no, can't do that. Total secrecy. We're the nuclear industry. We don't have to do nothing. Only poison everybody as quick as we can without you working out what's happening. The South Bruce Forum hears international experiences in storing used nuclear fuel. This is Canada's story. And they brought in so-called deep geological repository experts from Finland and Sweden. But they don't, there is no experts because nobody's ever done it. They're planning on doing it, like a lot of countries, but they haven't done it. And and it has to be down there a long time to quantify any assertions on top of that. A forum held by South Bruce about a proposed deep geological repository heard from representatives from some of the world leaders in underground storage of spent nuclear fuel, but there is no leaders because we don't do it. Total manipulation, right? World leaders in underground storage of spent nuclear fuel, but we don't store spent nuclear fuel underground anywhere on the planet. Allegedly. Except for Hanford. And they're killing a lot of people trying to get it back out. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization is expected to make its final site selection detection late 2024. But what they're gonna do is have a referendum. They bought off half the community, the other half hates their guts. They're gonna have a referendum. Any idea how that's gonna work out? Well, they're gonna work it the exact way they want it to, where they say no. Well, we gotta start all over again. Poor us. We got $24 billion and nowhere to spend the money on. Let it all this money earned by it sitting and they're investing it in something, who knows what. So they're making a lot of money off $24 billion, right? Since 2002. And so they go into these communities and they got all this extra money from interest and they just throw money around in these communities and they divide the community. Then you want to have a referendum because you got to have a willing host. We can't put it somewhere where the community is not to. They bought up 1,500 acres of prime farmland because all nuclear power plants and nuclear waste sites typically are surrounded by farms because they're always venting, right? They got the advisor, the panel moderator is a former lead advisor to the U.S. Blue Ribbon Commission on American Nuclear Future. So they got an American running a panel of international scumbags in the Canadian, in this community in Canada where they want to put a repository. They don't even have Canadians on the panel, or they don't have Canadian as a moderator. Nuclear industry has no shame ever, right? So the forum couldn't have two better people to talk about the deep geological repository process in their own countries than Tina the Skank and Senior Vice President, the Finnish counterpart to the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, Jacob. We've talked about these people before, by the way. Former mayor and the host community of Sweden's future deep geological repositories. But there is no deep geological repository. There's a few countries digging holes, but there's no, they're not storing stuff there. They don't have a record of it. They don't have a experience with it. If you ask the people in the nuclear waste business, the non-nuclear waste, these are people who never done nothing, just took the money and let it sit wherever it's still. Who are the leaders in nuclear waste management, which is leaving it where it's at and letting it rot? And there it is. It is Finland and Sweden, which doesn't have a geological repository, by the way, where they're storing waste. So how can they be experts when they don't even do it? You can bring in any miner and tell you how to dig a hole. And that's all they are. They're miners. They haven't actually put anything in the ground. And they're using an American moderator at a Canadian meeting in a little community. That's not brainwashing at all. Probably here many people know people working at the nuclear power plants, know their safety culture, and know the operator is responsible. So that makes it easier. You're up in a little community in the middle of nowhere, and this is what you're saying to the people. You're not disconnected. You're not even human, sure. The whole idea of consent-based sitting, this is very key, that the industry has is very similar to us as well. The consent-based sitting is better in the immediate situation. Isaac said he was happy to see a large turnout at the forum because An attentive community is key to making informed decisions. Everything is done by referendum. And so they give one side of the community a lot of money, the other side they tell them to go drop dead, and then they're going to have a referendum. So what they want is, they want the community divided, and the community to say no. And so then you got to start the whole process off, and it takes another 5 years to go survey another area, and it never goes in a hole in the ground. And instead of going 1,000 miles north where you're not going to hurt nobody, and dig a hole and put the waste at least isolated but retrievable if we can deal with it. But there's no such thing as dealing with it is not reprocessing. The extraction causes endless plumes to cover the planet of fission products. They shouldn't be making it, obviously, because it's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So they also had a farmer there who farms the Bruce nuclear development, right alongside of it, rather. Everything is vented. All the way there, they repackage it, and then they put it in the hole in the ground, right? So everything's going to be radioactive. This is what they're doing in the farmland, so it don't bioaccumulate, and they can poison you in the supermarkets. Every facet of the story was creepy as shit. She also talked about an agricultural impact study that was conducted in the area. The CEO, Lori, we covered many times, safety is the top priority. Well, safety is the top priority. You'd already have a hole in the ground 1,000 miles north where there would be no debates, right? So their trick is never have a solution. They do that by going and invading a community and having referendums they know that is going to be voted down. We want to protect the people and the environment for generations to come. This is a garbage can diagnosis, by the way. This is right out of the scumbag playbook. The waste is currently stored above ground in reinforced high-density cement containers that are vented into the environment. Everything is vented. Constant radioactive emissions from everything. Because everything's still splitting the atoms into the environment, see? There's an invisible snowstorm that you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or feel it or touch it. But it's lethal. The organization secured land northwest, which is 1,500 acres, of tea water. Said it only chose the site with a willing host community and must demonstrate a willingness to be a host. They got to get down on one knee and kiss the ring of the Nuclear Waste Management Organization Swami ring, and they'll graciously let them pollute everybody with their farms for the next 100 years. This organization is not trying to come up with a solution. That's their job, is not to come up with a solution, and the routine is to keep doing this, right? Oh, they got to wait another couple of years before they can do it, or next year. Now they're waiting next year to 2024. They're going to make a decision, but it has to be a willing community. It has to be willing victims. You have to say, please come here and poison all of our farms and fresh water. I can't remember. I think there's like 70,000 ponds up there, too. It's perfect for the nuclear industry. If there's a real beautiful area and you're going to and that's what they covered, right? So they can destroy it. Gordon Edwards, who refused to acknowledge reactor 3 and 4 fuel pools don't exist, is going to do an anti-nuclear waste management organization info sessions in 3 different communities, and they're going to be streaming live on their YouTube channel. We are the Nuclear Free North's YouTube channel, 7 p.m. their time. We might restream it here live and see what they're going to say or are saying. We're definitely going to be covering it. That one, right? Now, he's done great work, but he won't acknowledge Reactor 3 and Reactor 4 fuel pools are gone. And so I can't trust anybody that won't do that. I'm very suspect, because You can't be an expert and not know that, see? Or you can't be an expert and not know that reactor 3 and 4 fuel pools don't exist. When you're a nuclear expert, you know the fuel pools were at the top of the building. You can clearly see there's no top to the building, right? So where are they exactly, Dana? Oh, well, they're covered the whole planet in endless radioactive fallout. That's where they are. And Gordon is not going to tell people that. He's not going to show people that. He's not going to say, hey, look at this picture. These journalists are pretending they're on top of a building that don't exist in a fuel pool that don't exist. Right? Because that's the end of the nuclear industry when that kind of stuff circulates. If that was to go viral on Twitter or Facebook, that's the end of the nuclear industry. And Greenpeace, I've sent that to them at least 100 times. All Greenpeace, they have a whole bunch of different Greenpeace UK, Greenpeace Canada. All of them blocked my Twitter account. Total coincidence, Dana. The federal government must deal with the storage of hazardous nuclear waste in San Onofre. The federal government? Yeah. And you're not going to let Holtec do it, are you? Holtec is a private company, by the way. Mexico said they're not going to allow Holtec to put a high-level fuel storage facility in Mexico. I think we got that story here, too, for tonight. Feeling really run down today. And, because, you know, I'm still recovering. And so I decided to just dive into the nuclear 24-hour cycle. And that's what we're doing tonight, right? The nuclear 24-hour cycle. Because that always cheers me up, right? How sad and pathetic am I? When this is what cheers me up. Because that's what it does, right? The federal government, I'm obsolete, right? The federal government must, because I care, I give a shit. Like most of you folks that are watching this, we're obsolete because we care. That makes us a threat to all the industries. We care about life, we care about insects, we care about learning, we care about exploring, we care about all the precious flora and fauna. We care, and that makes us very, very dangerous people to an industry that doesn't. Allowed to ban high-level, there it is there, and banned a high-level nuclear waste storage facility effective in June. So starting in June, Holtec, which is a private corporation, Holtec International, Chris Singh, is finally getting shot down. They shouldn't exist. So universities should be decommissioning reactors, not nuclear power private corporations with no accountability. And they love it, right? Because, you know, these companies will take the worst way so they can make the biggest profit. They'll cause the most pollution so they can make the biggest profit. And Chris Singh has demonstrated that he has no intentions of doing a good job of a decommissioning. He's the opposite, right? And nobody that's really going to do the job can exist because the money, there's never enough money to do the decommissioning properly. It should take around 60 years to decommission the site. And the 2 coal, gas, and oil plants that are dedicated to it, to build it, to run it for its life, and then 60 years to decommission it. And then people call it emissions free because they're hemorrhaging, they're always splitting the atoms in all the fuel pools. And the amount we're talking about in the fuel pool is infinitely more than was in the reactor, because you take the reactor cores out and put it in the fuel pool for 4 decades. Every 16, 18 months, you're taking out about half a reactor core. And so that is still splitting the atoms with no containment. That's why they have the tall stacks on the site, just to vent that off-site. And that's why the majority of them are surrounded by farms. But thank goodness someone said no to Holtec. The only problem is there's nowhere else to put it. They're just going to leave it where it is at all the nuclear power plants, where it's vented into all the farmland and the communities and the drinking water supplies. And the aquifers are always built on top of aquifers that feed all the farms in that state. The bizarre plan to use nuclear bombs to create an island or an inland sea in the Sahara. So they're talking about 5,000 or 5 million square miles. And because the Sahara is below sea level, they figured they can get different oceans, the Atlantic and the Mediterranean and the Red Seas, connected by a channel through the Sahara. And they would use nuclear weapons to make the channel. Maniacs, eh? But this was the Atoms for Peace initiative that they started up, the lunatics. And they wanted to create joint aquifers with nuclear weapons. Of course, everything's going to be radioactive, right? There's all kinds of examples of the worst possible concepts. They wanted to do it very, very badly because it meant blowing up nuclear weapons. And they're well aware of the radioactive legacy. In fact, a lot of these underground caverns that they created with nuclear weapons, they're still burning at 400 and 500 degree Fahrenheit temperatures underground all these years later. And so any fresh water or rain that ingresses into these caverns, these huge, massive underground caverns created by megaton bombs, each is, megatons, 1,000 Hiroshimas type bombs, I should say. That ends up in the water table at some point. Everything's connected, right? The Tamil Nadu government gets a legal notice for remarks. Now, the Kandakulam nuclear power plant protest this governor said they were protesters, there's thousands of them, were paid by international environmental organizations and stuff like that to protest, right? And was this India? I can't remember. The thousands of men and women who participated in the protests in the public interest, there's no basis whatsoever for the governor's assertion that said the protest was funded by foreign countries. And we have a nuclear plant in the south. Every time you start work there will be protests in the name of climate. Some about fallout, some on safety. And we realized that this money actually trailed those who were active here. Nobody comes out here with hungry stomachs, unable to do it. Someone has to support them, right? The money trail goes to those entities in a foreign country, Europe, United States, and different countries, from where the money is being sent for these activities. Let me show you an example of India after Fukushima for 9,000 protesters. Can I find it? Because my problem is I got too much, right? You see, it's usually, I can get pretty close to it with a couple of clicks, then I got to look it up. Oh, luck would have it. And so this is the same nuclear power plant I'm going to show you. It started after the Fukushima nuclear power plant. So there was 9,000 people were charged with sedition for protesting the same nuclear power plant as he's talking about. So that's India. And their crime, and then the police went there and beat the shit out of them. And then now they've been sitting for a decade waiting to go to trial. And that their crime was participating in a peaceful protest against establishing a nuclear power plant in that same community that he's talking about today. So the new protesters that are still protesting, despite the fact that 9,000 were beaten up and charged with sedition, and that their crime was protesting the same nuclear power plant. And now just currently they're claiming that it was foreign entities that are paying the protesters. Now, you've seen what happened with Fukushima, and, 30 million one-ton bags. You've seen all the deceit, and there's 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Nuclear fuel to be delivered to Turkey's nuclear site by April of 27. I don't believe that because they're still constructing it, right? And it uses up all the precious metals on the planet. It uses enough cement to build a sidewalk all the way to Rome. They're building the nuclear plant in a country which has 5 times more seismic fault lines than the whole of Europe continent itself. And it is the biggest security and public health threat in the history of the Republic of Turkey. The platform calls on everyone to spread their campaign for cancellation of the nuclear plant. And there's been many cancellations over the years, so it's not like it can't happen. But they're building a plant where there's 5 times more fault lines than the rest of Europe, the EU continent combined. And we just seen an earthquake there, right? Probably the worst one we've seen this decade. Catastrophic, actually, right? U.S. Navy names a nuclear submarine after a guy who's still alive and working for a big mortgage broker. First off, you don't need nuclear submarines. You can't use the nuclear weapons for starters. It's not a deterrent. The biggest threat is biological weapon, right? Because what's worse, a biological weapon or a nuclear weapon? Right? It's a biological, chemical weapon, or a biological weapon, like Ebola or something like that was mutated and then released worldwide. A jet goes up and flies around the world, and its chemtrail instead is Ebola. Don't think they haven't thought about it. Why do you think I just said it? Because they've thought about it. Probing the helium nucleus beyond the ground state. The helium is the most studied element. They use a lot of helium, of course, for nuclear reactors. And a couple of decades ago, they came out and said, we're running out of helium, so get used to not being able to get your hands on it. Well, the industry produces a lot of helium on its own, right? Radioactive helium. A new element, electron scattering experiment, challenges our understanding of the first excited state of the helium nucleus. And so the problem is the industry can't be trusted with information, right? Because it weaponizes it and doesn't use it for anything good. If you might use it for 1,000 bad things first and then something supposedly good, right? But there is no anthropogenic man-made isotopes ultimately that are good. There's a better solution by not doing that out there somewhere. And if you put your collective together, you will figure it out. Man-made anthropogenic radiation is a threat to all species, floras and faunas included. Northampton nuclear weapons activist Ira Heffen wins a Peace Award. Nuclear weapons. Well, the most dangerous thing is a nuclear power plant because it's always hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools. And that they're typically surrounded by farms. And so we see a lot of this, right? We see a lot of, they encourage it, right? Yeah. Don't pick on nuclear power, pick on nuclear weapons. Well, nuclear power is your biggest enemy. That's the ones that's exterminating the planet. Nuclear weapons didn't help, by the way, right? The nuclear wars they had, you call them nuclear testing, but they're the same bombs, same radioactive fallout. After 45 years of fighting for the worldwide elimination of nuclear weapons, a local physician, GP, believes the solution could be no more than 10 years away. Yeah, because they already sentenced everybody to a nuclear death by constant emissions from all the fuel pools worldwide, nuclear dumping, nuclear accidents. And nuclear accidents are never it's downplaying it to call it an accident. It's a nuclear event, catastrophic event, because the releases are so catastrophic because there's so much of it. Is a $368 billion nuclear power submarine program for Australia money well spent? Of course not. It's like we talked about this a decade ago when America set up a base. It was longer than that, isn't it? And I put out a video about it when the Americans set up a base in Australia, their first base. And I said, well, the first thing we see with new military bases is children getting kidnapped all around the country, and then brothels opening close to the bases because a lot of the soldiers are young, right? So they kidnapped all these young girls and use them for get them on drugs and use them for prostitution for the military bases. And the military goes to war, their number one weapon is rape. That's how you create resistance, right? You rape all the children and all the wives and everybody else, and then everybody else hates your guts. And now you got resistance. Now you got a resistance. And so now you can justify 5.5 million rounds a month into the community because of this resistance, but it's created by the industry itself, right? Some of these stories are horrific, by the way. It's horrific. There was one soldier, he came back, and it's a pretty rough story. He came back, and he was sitting in his shed with a bunch of his buddies that he grew up with. They were drinking beer. It was late at night, and cell phones are around at this stage, right? And he was talking about how he went into this, they were told to go into this village, and there was terrorists, there was resistance there anyway. And so they killed everybody in this one house, and their 16-year-old daughter. He took her back to the base, and he charged soldiers $5 each to have sex with her. And there was a lot of them. And so finally he shot her and killed her. And he was laughing about it, and one of his buddies was there with the cell phone recording everything. And it didn't bother him at all, right? It was normal, see? I'll never forget it. I was heartbroken for weeks. And Australia was captured. And now, because we covered a story a few weeks ago about all the military weapons producers have set up shop in Australia, but they got no way to really make money. So this was their way of making money, was to convince Australia to bankrupt the country, ignore the schools, ignore the hospitals, ignore the energy, catastrophic events, and just turn into a military-industrial complex as if China was going to invade them or something. Disturbing clues at Fukushima nuclear plant may be an omen for another disaster. I'm not even going to go down that road. That's the... Again, they're talking about reactor 1. They're talking about the fuel later in the story. They'll talk about how the fuel is in the pool, and they're going to get it out later this year or next year. But there is no fuel in the pool. Just like there's no fuel in reactor 3 and 4, but they pretended there was, and they got it all out, and everything is great. And they're Japan. The final phase of Hinkley Point C, which is surrounded by farms, by the way. Offshore work visible from Birmingham. So they got these great big ships out there, and they have legs that extend down to the ocean floor. And what it is they have cranes, of course, and they're going to open up the tunnel that's 5 miles offshore, I think. They dug out underground 5 miles, 6 miles of tunnels. And so their job now, they laid down 5,000-ton structures, 10 million pound structures on the ocean floor last summer to circulate water to the 2 nuclear reactors, but they still got to open it up. So 10 million pounds of nothing but the best metal. It has to be inspected 3 different times everything in the nuclear industry. And it'll help Britain fight climate change. Oh, and it's surrounded by farms. Let me see if I can find that picture. I probably can't find it right now. The big problem is because I have so much. And I could find it, I know, if I want to, but I didn't. Can't believe I can't find that. Well, it is, but it takes a few minutes for me to dig it up, right? Or does it? You never know with Dana. It could. So Hinkley Point C is over there, and Sizewell C is right here. They both got, that's the two new nuclear plants, and they're old ones, but they're going to have two nuclear reactors, the major reactors there, right? What's interesting about both of them is they're surrounded by farms. Like Sellafield, right? Surrounded by farms. They have meltdowns there in 57. They're still hemorrhaging 8 million litres a day into the Atlantic Ocean from the mixed oxide fuel meltdown. But anyway, the industry is insane. Oak Family Advisor LLC Boost Holdings at BWT Technologies as Q1 earnings fall short of expectation. So they're a provider of nuclear components and related products, primarily to the government operations segment. And BMW Technology, substantial player in Navy nuclear reactor production for submarines. So these are disease factory machines, basically. Right? Ultimately, these are disease factories. Brookhaven National Laboratories new director Joan Ann Hewitt joined Stony Brook faculty in New Jersey rather. In Brookhaven National Laboratory, the minute you hear the word National Laboratory, the first thing you're gonna, if you've been around for a while, the first thing you're gonna realize is it's built on one of the biggest aquifers in that part of the country. Second off, it is radioactive as hell for the last 50 or 60 years for sure. And third off, they're the worst neighbors you could ever have. In fact, there's all kinds of neighbors suing them from cancer, right? They've polluted all the wells, all the water, as far as the eye can ever see from a airplane. And a lot of these people that they hired are very incredibly educated, unbelievable, eh? And they're usually compartmentalized too. A lot of them don't even. It's hard to believe she don't understand the big picture, because she's the project manager, so to speak, right? She's running the show of 2,600 or something like that. 2,800? Do I hear 28? 2,800 scientists, engineers, technicians, and professionals that are contaminating all the farms and all the fresh water. Study finds an altered RNA editing in the schizophrenics. So schizophrenics, you see an explosion of it after nuclear meltdowns and nuclear accidents. Same as autism, diabetes, and Down syndrome, and Alzheimer's and dementia. Right, so Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, and schizophrenia, and Down syndrome. Did I say Down syndrome? So schizophrenia, dementia, autism, Down syndrome, and I forget now. Schizophrenia, autism, Down syndrome, Alzheimer's, and dementia. So these are all mental, serious, brutal mental health issues, right? They're all associated with radioactive fallout. If you live within 15 miles of it, you're going to see. If you do studies within 15 miles of a nuclear power plant on Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and Down syndrome and schizophrenia, you're going to be blown away, right? You're just going to be totally blown away. You're going to call it an epidemic. But there's 1,800 diseases, not just those 5. But mental health-wise, that's 5 major ones. And they're debilitating for the families too, right? National Submarine Day celebration. Well, you're celebrating something that you can't use. You can't use the nuclear weapons because you can't cash your checks anymore. Like, why? it's about the nuclear industry making money, right? It's nothing about. You can't have a future with these, and every once in a while they'll sink or they'll have accidents and they'll contribute to the demise of all the species. Off maintaining nail perfect score on inspection of aged jets. This is the U.S. Navy or airborne. Some of these are really old. Like some of these planes will burn the equivalent of 1 million cars in a 24-hour period worth of fuel. To do it in the upper troposphere or higher, and that stuff could take decades to wash out, right? Not only that, because they're doing it all day, every day for decades and decades and decades. They limit the amount of sunshine is able to come through, protect, which all the species need. Protecting civilization and life on Earth. It's kind of scary. So this guy wanted to start up another organization, much like the World UN, rather. The world in 2023 is in deep trouble. The United States and other countries act as if they care less about the future. So therefore he wants to, right? I think we just moved on. No. Yeah. Rosatom plans to complete world's largest research nuclear reactor a year ahead of schedule. Rosatom. World's largest multi-purpose fast neutron research reactor is going to be 1 year ahead with a thermal capacity of 150 megawatts. It's a pretty big bad boy. More than 1,300 workers and engineers are working on the construction site of this massive disease factory. And they do studies around these places after of sex ratio studies, males to females. And what they discover is there's more males than females, which means they're contributing dramatically to the pollution, right? Yeah, so United Kingdom is going to start printing money with King Charles on the money. I guess Canada will be doing it too. If they do that, I'm going to hate it. That's going to be just terrible news if they do something like that. More and more people are positive about nuclear power. I cracked up when I read that today. I still can't say it without laughing, right? More and more people are positive about nuclear power. Nothing can be further from the truth. There is no nuclear renaissance. They're desperately trying to all give them credit. Not that they deserve credit, I suppose. Help Wanted ad seeks employees able to carry out a conversation. That sounds like a nuclear scientist to me, Dana. Radioactive rain caused 130 schools in Korea to close. What would Thunderfoot say if you showed him that one? You've been over to Dana's site. He's full of lies. He photoshopped all of that. Yet rain in California had 10 times more radioactivity. It was worse than that. It was 220 million atoms per liter of the iodine-129, so it never goes away. It never goes away. Researchers and that kind of number saturates the thyroid glands of all the species, right? Which means they're producing radioactive hormones. And for insects and that's whole body X-rays. That's sterilizing all the small species, right? And it doesn't allow the ice to crystallize. That's why you see the glacier breaking up, because the ice can't crystallize, right? It's the atomic plague. That's why we call it the atomic plague, because it affects everything, right, through Wigner effects. Researchers too frightened to get 100 kilometers from the meltdowns. They're wearing tungsten vests. Not nuclear scientists or nuclear academics. Come on. The homeless are. Water cannons are unable to spray the reactors. The helicopters can't spray it. The water cans can't spray it. Bring in the homeless. Bring in the geezer squads, as they call it. Seniors sought for frontline radiation. Not nuclear companies, not nuclear power plant volunteers, not nuclear universities, but the seniors. You know, the people that worked all their life to create a country so you can enjoy a day. Japanese workers brave radiation for a temp job. Temporary job. Brave radiation. They don't even know what it is. Temp workers fighting to repair crippled Japanese nuclear plants. Well, the plant was destroyed. There was nothing to repair. Top Tokyo doctor dealing with nuclear workers demand government step in at Fukushima plant for safety reasons. Some can't even read. That definitely sounds like a nuclear scientist to me. Mom, the nuclear scientist can't read. UN officials astounded that the homeless are taken to work at Fukushima. At the end of the month, they're left with no pay. And they end up in debt to the employees after food and housing. So the employees are just monsters, right? They're the actual heroes. There's no nuclear scientists coming out saying how brutal it is at Fukushima. It's the homeless and the destitute and the mentally disabled are working at Fukushima. The homeless are treated like disposable people, but worse. They're given second-hand paper suits, for God's sakes. Even Forbes, of all people, said it was outrageous. And Forbes is disgusting, despicable pro-nuclear. Homeless are being sold to companies and put to work on a nuclear meltdown. Not nuclear scientists, not academics, but the homeless. A cynical disregard for human life. Risking a bleak future for this radiation-contaminated nation. The whole nation. The mentally handicapped are working at Fukushima, often given worse radiation suits than regular employees, aka paper suits. TEPCO claims they burned 7,000 paper suits a day in the incinerators on site. They're claiming there's nothing 7,000 people can do there, right? There's not 7,000 nuclear workers, and there ain't 7,000 homeless there, so how many is there? And when they were saying it, we got the pictures. We've never seen more than 5 or 6 people in the picture. Nuclear labs, Los Alamos National Laboratory, at least 967 people have applied individually and been denied compensation for cancer. And at least 900 have been accepted and for lifelong disability for cancer. If you work at Hanford, nuclear waste, 585 square mile site, for 8 hours you're entitled to a pension. Think about that statement. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court last year, right? And the Supreme Court agreed they should be entitled to. Anywhere in the last 50, 60, 70 years, if you worked at Hanford, you don't have to prove it happened to you. You don't have to prove the sickness was caused by working there. You just got to be sick, and you're entitled to a pension. I should tell you everything you need to know about nuclear fallout, folks. Classes return to Japanese town hosting Fukushima nuke plant. We covered that at the beginning. We'll cover it one more time. Sending children back into the nuclear wasteland, to the no-go zone, where only 10% of the town is open. And they can each day they can see. Now, they're traveling from a nuclear wasteland to that nuclear wasteland to go to school. So if you don't think the industry is insane, you need to go back and start the video again. You'll get up to speed. Won't take that long. Won't be that painful. Those little yellow and white ones are where they're moving people back in these little sections. The red is the nuclear wasteland, no-go zones. Or what they call difficult to return is a nuclear, everybody else worldwide calls it a nuclear wasteland. So that kind of contempt, to use that narrative that is difficult to return instead of what it can never be cleaned up. The reactors are still melting down. And just to make the industry look like it's a pretty good industry, they're going to send victims, children on top of that, into the nuclear wasteland. I got no idea how anybody or the world can sit in silence. I got no idea. And I got no idea how people, like men, can call themselves men who sanctioned that or made it happen. I can't comprehend how come the police don't arrest people like this. What's the point of having police? By the way, there's over 300 police died trying to keep people out of those zones. Yeah, it's just another day in the nuclear industry, unfortunately. That's the freaky part of the story. This is just another day in nuclear. Don't care about nothing and it kills everything. It can only survive by killing everything. That's what it does for a living, right? It destroys all 8 million species. Well, it's that time of the night. We made it through another one. Let's check the poll one more time. How do we do tonight on the poll? We're doing pretty good tonight. We got 55 votes. Does opening schools 2 kilometers, man, going multiple nuclear meltdowns and 8 fuel pools that blew up and caught fire and melted down in Okuma, 2 kilometers away from these endless perpetual emissions, prove the pro-nuclear is cruel and evil? Somebody actually voted no? How the hell does that work? How heartless you got to be to vote no? Like really, how heartless you got to be to vote no? Really though. That's pretty heartless. That's the pro-nuclear. They just don't, and they know it's evil. They don't have any illusions. They're not confused. Okay, folks. Happy birthday for Kevin Blanche, wherever you two, Kevin. That's pretty awesome. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Let me change the volume a bit on that. I'm not sure what the show is tomorrow night. I got a couple of really important shows ready to go, but you kind of got to have energy and a spirit to tell those stories. One's die off in the marine life. You have birds, insects, animals. You got huge die offs going on. Did you know the bird flu killed the caveman and the dinosaurs? Thanks, Dana, for the moderating. Appreciate it. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Okay, where am I to here? We'll call it a night. We'll see everybody on the other side tomorrow night. I might be doing another news cycle tomorrow night. Or, because I actually got 5 news cycle shows ready to go. We got a show on studies I might do tomorrow night. And we got a show on the die-offs also that needs to be done. Because otherwise the folder gets so big you can't keep up with it, right? Okay, we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Have a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody on the next show. Take care, folks. If you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. It costs us little, and it might actually go a long way. You never know.